Know what to eat, but find yourself not eating it. Perhaps you've been on diets and off again and just wonder why you can't stick to them. The Eating For You podcast, hosted by me, Sally Ann Pisk, will show you what's been missing so you can enjoy a healthier way of eating that lasts. Hi, Sally Ann with you today, and it's my great pleasure to have Belinda Beck with me today for Healthy Bones Action Week. Welcome, Belinda.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Just before we get underway, I just want to give you some of Belinda's background in bone research and bone health. Belinda is Professor of Exercise Science at Griffith University, Gold Coast, Australia. Her work relates to the effects of mechanical loading on bone, has involved both animal and human studies from basic to clinical research. Her particular focuses have been exercise intervention across the lifespan for bone health and understanding and managing bone stress injuries in athlete and military populations. In 2015, Belinda established a transitional research facility and clinical practice in Brisbane, providing the evidence-based Onero exercise program for osteoporosis, which has now been licensed for delivery around the world. So, Belinda, tell us how your interest in bone health actually started. How did you get into this career path?
Well, as is often the case with researchers, it came from my own personal experience. And so I was a runner and I constantly had shin pain. And, this is back in the day, it's many years ago, but nobody could help me. And it didn't make any sense. Even in the 80s, medicine was still modern. And so it didn't make any sense to me that somebody couldn't stop my shins from hurting when I was running. And I sort of, vaguely thought I was very young. I was still in high school. I vaguely thought that I'd like to get to the bottom of it at some stage. It never occurred to me that I was going to be in a position to do that. But it did stick with me over the years. And I studied a Masters of Sports Medicine in Oregon. And one of my projects gave me the opportunity to delve into it. And once I started looking into it, I was hooked. Bone is the most incredible tissue. I have never stopped being fascinated by it, and it's carried me, through the next 40 years.
And isn't it wonderful to be in the position that you have been to do this research in so many different areas, and especially for something like osteoporosis and osteopenia, which we're going to talk about. But before we talk about bone breaking down, I'd really love you to share your understanding and what the research shows about what makes good quality bone. Obviously what we eat and our exercise, and I have seen one of your quotes, it was probably on the Bone Health Clinic website, and not all exercise is the same. So let us know a bit more about having good healthy bones.
Well, what makes good bones are parents with good bones. So genes are so incredibly important. They are predetermining, our fundamental blueprint that allows us to develop the bones that we have. And you do develop the most bone that you're ever going to have round about the end of the second decade. So you're a young adult, you can gain a little bit more, but from there, really, that's your skeleton is fully formed, and that's what you're working with. So vitally important to get proper nutrition that's good for bone as you're growing, and the primary mineral in the skeleton is calcium, but also vitamin D is vitally important to be able to absorb that from the gut. And then there are micronutrients and so on. Most of those things can be got from the diet. As well, you need some stimulus to make the bones know that they need to be strong. And that, of course, is exercise, because that's how we load our bones mechanically. So the more active you are when you're a kid with weight-bearing, impact kind of loads, higher forces are better than lower, with lots and lots of variety of movement. So that's how you build the biggest skeleton bank. And then throughout life, you have to maintain that sort of behavior, the same good diet and same as much exercise as you can, and avoid a number of things that will undermine that that bone bank. And these are things like alcohol and caffeine are not great. A little bit is okay, but too much is not great for your bones. Certain medicines, like steroids,
Yes.
really bad for bone.
Mm.
So if you, but they're also really important for certain conditions.
Mm.
So if you have to be on them, just be aware that they are bad for bone, and you might want to get off them as soon as you can, titrate your dose down as quickly as you can, obviously in discussions with your doctor. So just being aware of those kinds of things is really important.
It is really important. I remember even as a dietitian, studying, and the thing that I've often reflected on is that the years from 20 to 30 are so important, but it also coincides with a time when women especially are dieting and restricting food intake. And I've often wondered how much damage that does, to the development of bone. Are you aware of any research about that?
Well, certainly there's evidence if there are extremes of energy restriction, it's terrible for bone. It's akin to going through menopause, because what happens is that's actually what you're doing in these extreme conditions where you're very much restricting energy intake versus what you're using up daily. You're kind of in drought conditions. You put yourself into a situation where your circulating estrogen drops, and that is really deleterious for bone because estrogen is highly protective of bone.
Mm.
If you take it away, the bone resorbing cells are not clamped anymore. So, I mean, at any time in your life, an energy deficit is not great for bone, but especially during development, it's bad because once you have missed that window of opportunity to develop to your full genetic potential, you don't get that back. So we see a lot of people who perhaps have had anorexia when they were younger, but have been extremely careful with their diet, are the correct weight now, have done a lot of exercise throughout their life, and they come in age quite young, maybe early 50s, and they say, I'm devastated, I've got osteoporosis. And when we find out about the history, we actually see that it was stemming from that period of their life.
Yeah.
It's interesting to note too, though, that at any stage in your life, if you undergo considerable weight loss, you're not only losing fat, but you will also lose muscle and bone. Now, the fat is very easy to regain, the
Yes.
muscle and bone is not. So if you are dieting, really important to add exercise into that mix because that will help to maintain the bone and muscle.
Yes, and this is what I've talked a lot about on, this podcast and in other forums, that talking about body weight is really not that helpful because we need to be talking about not just fat, but muscle and bone. And it's something, I was sort of thinking when you were talking about the skeleton earlier on, it's so important. It's our foundation. But because it's kind of hidden away, we don't think about it as much as we might our skin, or, whether we've put on a little bit of weight around the middle, or whether we've got more muscles in our arms. We see those things, but we don't actually see our bones. But as they say with a house, if the foundations are not strong, then the house is going to be weaker as well. So I think that's all really interesting, and I like the idea that we have to invest in our bones. But of course, once we do get to our 50s, that opportunity, obviously through nutrition, has passed. But there is good news, isn't there, in terms of women and men who find out that they have osteopenia, the thinning of the bones, or the osteoporosis. We can, make a difference through exercise, can't we?
Yeah, we can. This is the good news story of the last sort of decade
Yeah.
because for years, probably the last almost century, the mantra has been you get all the bone you're ever going to have. That's why I did modify what I said there by the end of the second decade, because actually you can continue to increase if you do the right sort of exercise. You won't go through the roof. I mean, there is a limit to everybody,
Yes.
but whereas once before it was thought that you would gain a certain amount of bone and then there would be this gradual, inexorable loss across life.
Mm.
Now we know that we can, at the very least, maintain that bone that we gain through life. But even when you go through menopause, and as I mentioned, withdrawal of circulating estrogen is what is responsible for that dramatic loss of bone at time of menopause, you will lose some bone then, but we do absolutely have the opportunity to build it back up and also prevent some of the loss that may happen if you do the right sort of exercise. So we have people at the clinic who are absolutely growing bone.
Yes, and I have found, well, found out, heard stories from women who are in my Onero program. So yes, I have shared with my community before that, yes, I found out, the beginning of this year that my bones weren't as strong as I would have liked them to have been. And yeah, some of the women there talk about their bone scans changing and showing that they've even perhaps moved from osteoporosis classification back into osteopenia, or increased how much bone they've got even in the osteopenia range. So it is really exciting, and it's really great to be with women of ages probably from about mid 50s through to 80, and seeing them really fit and strong as well, which is obviously another upside of doing the Onero program.
There's so many wonderful things about it that I never anticipated. Just if we went right back to the Lift More study, which was the clinical trial, the first clinical trial where we tested this heavy lifting and impact program, and we were so terrified that we might hurt people, but it turns out we didn't, and we did grow bone. But I often talk about when you do research, human research, the fundamental thing you always measure is height and weight. That's just so you can describe your population. And we were not looking for changes in those things in the Liftmore study, but lo and behold, we did see this difference in height at the end of the study, because it's not obviously 65-year-old women were not growing.
No.
It was because their posture improved, because the strength of the muscles of their back were making them stand up straighter. Now, that is an under-recognized factor of importance to postmenopausal women. Our vanity never goes away throughout life. We want to look the best we possibly can. Getting stooped over makes us look and feel old, but it's not just vanity. If you become stooped over, your clothes no longer fit you the way they used to. And in fact, in some cases, if people have a long dressing gown and that loss of height makes it drag on the ground, that actually increases your risk of falling. And falls, as we know, are the nemesis of osteoporosis, because that's what causes the fracture. So this improvement in height through Onero is one of the, nice little side outcomes that we never anticipated. And you touched on this, the way that people feel. Again, I did not anticipate that this exercise program would be such a feel-good psychosocial sort of therapy
Yes.
for the people who come to my clinic. When I walk in the door and I walk and I see groups of people exercising, the energy in the room is so positive, and I don't want to go out there and start clicking cymbals and burning patchouli, but it's just a fundamental quality of life element that people feel better from doing it. They feel better doing it with people who are like them. They don't feel intimidated, because it's not going to a gym where there's walls of mirrors. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to watch myself exercising. I actually don't really want to watch myself at all. And it doesn't matter. You can wear whatever you want. There's no loud music, so you can actually hear what the coach is saying to you.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is a very positive experience. And then afterwards, off they go and have coffee together. So yeah, there are all these ancillary benefits for these group classes, and it's why when we license Onero providers in other places, they often say, well, I want to do one-on-ones. I want to provide the best possible experience for my clients. And I say, one-on-one training in Onero is not the best possible experience. It is better that it's delivered in a class setting.
Yes. And I think that can be the case for a lot of things, because with some of the online programs that I provide to help women get out of the dieting cycle and adopt healthier eating habits for their health and their weight, the small group coaching calls, that sharing and what you said, being with people who are on a similar journey, who are experiencing similar things, is quite inspiring and also motivating. And yeah, just feeling like you're not alone with this health journey that you're on. And I've got a bit of a funny story about the Onero classes because I live in a country area and I'm a fair drive from my local class. I sort of do one session a week at home by myself and then I go to the class because I need the supervision. I want the supervision. I'm always improving how I'm doing things. But the first time I did it at home, it was awful. It was like I just didn't enjoy it at all. Everything felt heavier and I thought, well, the next time I did it at home by myself, I turned some music on because then I thought, well, at least I'm not alone. I was quite surprised, Belinda, how much I missed that class environment. And having lived in rural areas, I've often exercised on my own. That's not been an issue, but I really missed it when I was on my own. So it has a lot of benefits. And I can see for some of the women who've been going, longer than what I have, yeah, they've formed these connections, these friendships as well, which is an added bonus, as you said, from the program. Before I forget to ask you, with your research, do you feel that the current guidelines around the age at which we should have the DEXA, the bone scan done to test our bone strength, around 50 is the right age for most people?
I would probably say 50 is about the right age. It does definitely depend on the individual, and certainly if they have had anything that is likely to influence their bone health throughout their life. So, for example, anorexia when they were younger, or they have a terrible respiratory condition where they need to be constantly on prednisone, high doses of prednisone. So there's a risk factor for having lower than early menopause, going through menopause, 30s or 40s, those sorts of reasons, you would definitely be advised to have a bone density test earlier. But 50 is about right because the average age of menopause is sort of 52, 54 through there. You want to have a scan before then, so you've got a baseline so that as you go through menopause you can see just how much you've lost, because if you have a scan afterwards you don't know where you were, what your genes sort of set you up for anyway, and you don't really know what you're working with, and I think that is helpful. Now, the MBS doesn't reimburse DEXAs unless you're at high risk. Yes. For osteoporosis, or until you're 70, I believe, and then it's only every 2 years. But keep in mind, they're not very expensive. Right. You can self-fund, and it's probably, if your doctor's not going to refer you, it's probably worth just shelling out the couple of $100 and getting your spine and hip done. If your doctor won't refer you, but one of your parents has had a hip fracture or some other form of osteoporotic fracture, that may convince them. It should convince them to get you scanned early.
Yes, because I kind of went through menopause around, sort of COVID time, and you just, everything just sort of got left, like a lot of people talk about. And I often probably regret that I didn't have a scan before I went through menopause for that exact reason that you're talking about. I really don't know what my peak bone density was before menopause now. I can only work with the reading that I had earlier this year. So yeah, I think it is valuable. And I talk to my clients about it, and many of the women that I work with are sort of in that 40 right through to 80 sort of age range. So I have been talking to them more about, have you thought about having a bone scan? And I think with a referral, mine was around $100 or something like that. So for me, that was well worth it, because I see my 90-year-old mum now with osteoporosis, and she's still walking quite well, but she's got a walker and not as independent perhaps as she would have liked to have been at that age. So I've got good reason, there's so many sports that I love, because when I first told my husband, my bone results, he says, oh, you won't be able to ski anymore. And I said, yes, I'll be doing everything. I'll be doing everything I can to make sure I can do all the things that I love to do. And again, this is why I say we we worry about our weight, we worry about what we look like, but we should be really worrying about our bones, because to me that is, a big part of our independence as we get older. So, if you're listening
Oh,
today, I'm going to be talking about bones, 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 because, just from, again, my family experience of my mum with osteoporosis and me finding out with the thinning bones. And I would say I'm a fairly active person, but then the genetics comes into it as well, as you said.
funny story about skiing. I
Yeah.
had done Onero for about a year. When I took my family on a family holiday, I wanted to teach the kids to ski.
Yeah.
And I hadn't skied for 17 years.
Mm.
And because of Onero, I mean, you know the kind of strength you get in your lower extremity.
Yeah.
I skied all day with absolutely no problems, and the next day I wasn't even sore. So there are absolutely things that there's no reason why you should stop doing the things that you love to do. In fact, if you do stop, you won't be able to start again. So you should continue to do them. And all I would say in response to your husband saying you won't be able to ski again is you just can't fall again.
Yes. That's exactly right. So it's up to him to take me on runs that I can actually manage, not,
Exactly.
overextend me.
Yeah.
I have to
No more
say,
moguls.
exactly. I actually don't mind moguls. It's the thin shoots, off the edge that can be a bit icy. I'm not really into those at all. But I quite like sort of more all mountain skiing, because I like the walking aspect as well, and you can get away from the crowds. I think anytime I've had a fall, it's been more because someone's come in front of me and I haven't been able to stop in time, or I've sort of done something to avoid hitting someone else. So, yeah, away from the crowds is my secret, I think, to staying upright, Belinda. So, talking about the strength, this has been one of the funny things. And I know Adam, my physio, said to me when I first talked to him about the Onero program, a lot of women worry that they're going to bulk up and, look like the Hulk or something like that. But it's not about building muscle in that way. I certainly, yes, I'm changing shape in some ways, but I'm certainly not getting bigger. If anything, I'm probably getting smaller. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, when anybody says that to me, I just say, you wish. There's just absolutely no way. I mean, it's hard enough to bulk up when you're a young woman with all of your hormones at the sort of youthful level, but when you're older, there is just no way.
No.
It's not happening, unless you're shooting up testosterone or something. It's not happening. And in fact, the opposite is that you'll get these lovely shapely arms that are not big.
Yeah.
They've just got a little bit of appealing muscle. So if they're worried about how they look, they're going to look better.
Yes.
Everything sort of, your shape becomes just a nice, tidy, healthy looking shape.
Yes. Yeah. And I can see the improvement with strength. And having said that, I have a horse and carrying 25 kilos or 30 kilos, not every day for her, but doing things with her. I've just found that I have, like you were saying, sort of more stamina with strength, if that makes sense. So I can carry a load for longer, or I can do things that require squatting or that sort of thing and not get any fatigue. And that's really great. And the other thing I meant to mention when you're talking about posture changes, I have done yoga for a number of years, so posture has been a big thing for that. But I've noticed that, of course, when you stand better, and my clients say the same, when you can sort of open up the chest, because I found, I have to say, doing the squats with the weights a little bit of an effort at first, just with your pecs being a bit tight from being at the computer. But you breathe better. So you breathe better and you have more clarity. You're not feeling lethargic as much because you're actually breathing in more oxygen. When you're stooped forward, then you cannot absorb, you can't breathe as deeply and you can't get as much oxygen. So I think that's another great benefit that people may not think about too.
And just your general body comfort. The being able to stand longer if you're at the post office standing in line. Many people are just, oh, I can't stand there. I have to find somewhere to sit down. And all of a sudden, yes, you can stand in line with the best of them, have a chat with the person next to you.
Yeah.
And I also hear people this is not an osteoarthritis program,
No.
but having said that, people with arthritis will come in and say, I'd really love for my knees and hips to not hurt as much, and especially my back is really bad. And we say we're not targeting those things in particular, and we will be able to accommodate some of those things by adjusting the program a little bit. But as they go along, they find that a lot of that discomfort is, if not completely vanishing, it's not some kind of miracle, it's considerably diminished. And so function is hugely increased. Now, the other day, I did an interview for Channel 7 for a study we're doing, and we had one of our clients talking to the camera about her experience, and completely unprompted by us, she said, I used to have back pain and now I don't. And so and we hear that a lot. It's when you make the muscles of your back stronger, you are able to achieve a proper neutral spine in your day-to-day activities, which actually reduces your back pain. So, yeah, these are unintended benefits, and the list is endless.
Yes, and I think especially as we sort of get into our 50s, there can be issues with past sporting injuries or other accidents or just poor posture that we can get chronic pain. And to hear that, yeah, you can get rid of the pain without a medication, then it's a wonderful outcome. I just can't talk highly enough about it myself in terms of the manageability of it as well, because I think this idea of signing up to something for the rest of your life can be daunting as well. But Belinda, share with us how little time and little frequency we need to do to get results.
Yeah, this is the thing about bone. It is a very particular tissue and it only reacts to certain things, but you don't need to do a huge amount of it. It's as if imagine your bone cells are like a little community, and they sort of are. The bone cells are inside bone tissue, tiny little things. They reach out and hold hands, so it's a great big network of cells. So
Mm.
even though they're in this hard tissue, they are all in connection. And movement signals to alert them all that something's happening. A lot of movement makes them know that they have to create more bone so that they prevent too much movement, which would cause a fracture. So they're very sensitive to that, and you don't need to tell them that very often for that signal to occur. So it's not, you don't have to run a marathon. You really just have to do one sprint, and the bone cells have gone, oh, right, okay, well, I need to do something now. So twice a week is what we think is the ideal amount of this heavy lifting, because it's enough to give the signal a couple of times a week to reinforce it, but also we don't necessarily think that more than twice a week is better, because your body needs time to recover and to adapt. So I was just at the American College of Sports Medicine meeting in the US, where I go to present our research, but I also have the opportunity to go to other lectures and sessions where they're talking about other things that are interesting to me. And I went to a session about the public health recommendations for exercise. And it was absolutely fascinating for me to see that the public health recommendations are twice a week resistance training, and then probably three or four times a week of just aerobic training, which is walking and running or whatever you like that gets your heart running. But resistance training, which is what Onero is, if you look at the benefit that you obtain from resistance training, the optimum benefit is twice a week. In fact, if you do it 3 times a week, the benefit diminishes. And nobody knows why that is, but it may have something to do with inflammation. Because
Yes.
when you do exercise, you do get an acute little inflammatory response, which then dissipates and makes you better. So I think that's fascinating, because most people think more is better. In actual fact, I think twice a week is the Goldilocks number
Yes.
for resistance training.
Yes, and I know, depending on how much I'm talking in between doing my exercise and so forth, but it's kind of around 30 to 40 minutes.
That's right.
But to get through those core exercises, you can do it quite safely in 30 to 40 minutes, which
Yeah.
we watch hours of TV, so 30 or 40 minutes to do something that's
Yeah,
strengthening our foundations, our bones, is really manageable. That's what I love about it
it
as
is.
well.
Well, the Lift More trials were 30 minutes
Mm,
twice a week, but
mm,
Onero is actually, in addition to the Lift More exercises, we add in balance and mobility. And so that's what makes it 45 minutes because
yeah.
those kinds of exercises are absolutely vital to preventing falls.
Yes.
So, yeah. 45 minutes is our standard time at the
Mm.
bone clinic, and I tell all the licensees that's what they should be doing too. And there's a little bit of variation
Yeah.
between them.
So, Belinda, is there anything else you would like to share about bone health?
I guess the biggest message is that something is always better than nothing. I do have this mantra that if you want to grow bone, you have to do Onero, and I absolutely believe that. There is
Mm.
no evidence to show that lower intensity exercise will grow bone.
Yes.
But something is better than nothing because the less you do, the more bone you will lose.
Yeah.
So if there's no way in the world that you would ever do Onero, then just do something. Walking is not going to grow bone, but it's
Mm.
definitely going to be good for you. It's going to help your mobility and help you do the sorts of things that might help your bones. If you can play a sport that your body can handle and is not going to make you fall over, that's social, that is also even better because it's better for you mentally as well.
Mm.
Playing tennis is a great one because it's lots of backwards and forwards motion, and that sort of training helps to prevent you from falling. Some people say, I play golf, but my doctor says I shouldn't be doing these hard twisting motions anymore because I've got this osteoporosis of the spine. And I'll say, how long have you been playing golf for? 40 years. Have you ever had a fracture? No. Well, what makes you think you're going to fracture now?
Mm.
Actually, your body is probably quite well adapted to golf if you're playing it enough. If you're only playing it once a year, then no, you probably shouldn't be playing golf
Yes.
anymore. But if you've been playing it weekly for 40 years, it just makes me sad to think of that person stopping
Mm.
playing a game that they love that is so incredibly good for them. So you just have to be careful. Maybe you don't do an enormous wind up and follow through anymore. Maybe your your swing is going to go to hell. But if you
Mm.
keep playing because that's good for you. In terms of Onero, and I hesitate to rouse on you on your own podcast, but I do think that you shouldn't be doing Onero by yourself.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is specifically a supervised program.
Yes.
In the cases like yours, there are lots of people who don't live near an Onero provider, and so
Yeah.
that is how they sort of manage their own
Yeah.
condition. Go once a week and do once at home. I would never say that that's a thing that you should do, but if you are going to, because nobody listens to me, if you are going to, then please make sure that you don't lift as heavy at home.
I
And
don't. Yeah. Yeah.
it must really be a more moderate intensity lifting because it's amazing the difference just a small error can make to the load on your spine. Where that bar is in relation to your body, you might not be able to see. And even if you've got a mirror on the wall, you shouldn't be looking in the mirror
No.
because your eyes have to be in a certain direction.
Yes.
So it's really ideally, Onero is to be done supervised so you can get the most bang for your buck, the heaviest lifting, the safest way,
Yes.
but scale it back if you do it by yourself because I would hate for you to get injured.
Yeah, no, I kind of did that myself, Belinda. I sort of thought still learning to lift properly because I had never done weights before. Yeah, lifted a lot of things around the property, but not actual weights. So I'm very cautious with that and will drop it back. And I've also found too, and it happens in the class situation, that some days your body just doesn't want to lift as much. So we all sort of pull the weights back and just listen to the body. And then you'll go into class the next day and your body feels like lifting more. So it's also a bit of a mindful, and you've got to listen to your body a bit too, I think, in terms of what you're doing each time. But I really am with you. Be supervised. Don't think this is something you can do on your own. Even if you've lifted weights before, you may not have done these particular exercises with the barbell before. So, yeah, you need to know what you're doing because the last thing you want to do, and certainly I don't either, is get a strain or an injury because then that's going to stop you from participating, for weeks or months. So yeah, no, it's okay,
Yeah,
Belinda. You can
that's
rouse on
exactly
me.
right.
You can rouse on me on the podcast. I don't mind. Don't think my physio would have let me if he thought I was going to do something to injure myself. I think he saw that I was going to be, yeah, pretty careful at home as well.
Yeah, well, the movements are complex compound movements and they're not straightforward and they do take a while to learn. And sometimes you can't see where your body, you can feel, but you can't really see where your body is in space. You need somebody watching you. But yeah, I love the fact that it's making you more able to do the things you love to do.
Yeah.
I'm picturing you lumping bales of hay and carting buckets of feed around the place. And that being the case too, other for your listeners to be aware that don't just think about healthy movement when you're at the gym. When you're in your daily life, always try to keep weights close to your body and always use the same principles of keeping a neutral spine when you're lifting, because we do get the phenomenon of people getting beautifully strong at the clinic and then they think they can go and move the fridge at home, and it's different. It is a
Yes.
different movement and that's where they get hurt. And
Mm,
once you do get hurt, then as you say,
mm.
you're going to have to miss some classes. But if you tear a shoulder muscle, that can take a long time to heal. And if, heaven forbid, you have a fracture, a vertebral fracture, then you've got that. And actually, you increase your risk of another one by 4 times. So,
Yes.
yeah, we just be really sensible when you're doing your lifting.
Mm,
Oh, the other thing is when you are carrying your buckets of chaff and stuff around, try to carry 2 buckets, same weight, but put it in 2 buckets,
yes.
and the stress on your spine will be considerably reduced.
Yes.
So it's the same with shopping bags. Don't do that thing we all do when we get out of the car and get all our shopping bags in one hand so we can undo the front door with the one hand. Separate them into two, walk to the front door and put the one down or
Yeah.
both down and then open the door, because that uneven weighting is really bad for your back.
Yes, and I think that's interesting too. I sort of noticed when I started lifting that, not surprisingly, being a right-handed person, that I was a little bit sort of stronger on the right side than the left side. And when I started doing the free weights, I just pulled the weight back a bit so I could sort of bring the left side up to speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Because yeah, it is really fascinating. As I said again, coming from a yoga background and also a mindfulness background, just to feel how your body's moving. And what I have found is that I'm not always aware of what I'm doing. I think I'm lifting straight up, but I'm not, and this is where, again, we talk about the supervision being really important, because you can't, it's not the sort of exercise where you can turn and look in the mirror to see that your alignment is correct. You can't do that. So,
no,
yeah,
true.
Belinda, thanks so much. It's been a really lovely and practical conversation today. Where can our listeners and viewers find out more about the Onero program and hopefully find a class close to them?
A couple of ways. You can Google either the Bone Clinic, and the Bone Clinic will tell you, who we are and what we do. Translational research facility. We're collecting data on this exercise program. But also, you can, and if you live in Brisbane, you can come to us. In fact, you can come to the Bone Clinic even if you don't. People do fly in from all over, but
Yes,
it's not that convenient for most people. But if you're looking for Onero, we're not the only ones who offer it. So do a search for Onero locations, and a
yes,
map will come up. And there's little tags all over the map that you can zoom in on
yes.
and click on a tag that's closest to you, and that will be an Onero provider. If
Mm.
it says stop fracture on it, just ignore that. That's just a label for a research study we're doing. And the other thing is you can just search for Onero Academy, and that's the site where there's more information about Onero, but that's actually a training site for people who want to be Onero providers. And if you are a physio or an accredited exercise physiologist, you can actually contact us and become a provider. And if you don't have an Onero provider in your locale, but you know of a physio or an EP, I would strongly recommend that you show them that website, because that's how I would say almost 50% of our practitioners have come on board because one of their clients has said, can you please do Onero? And
Yes.
now they've got this thriving business with overflowing classes of
Yes.
people doing Onero. That's how to get somebody close to you. Just search for Onero Academy.
Yes. No, that's great because my doctor based in Sydney and he was a bit concerned that I wouldn't find a practitioner out where I live. But there is one close enough for me to get to. So just don't think if you're in a country area that there won't be someone. There could be. And I love that suggestion that if there isn't someone, talk to your local physio or exercise physiologist and see if they'd be interested in starting it. Because one thing I forgot to ask earlier, and I have seen from time to time on social media, different groups, either online or location-based programs for building bone strength. But what they're offering is nothing like what the Onero program is. So I think that's something we've got to be careful of in doing our own personal research, is that we are doing something that's evidence-based and is going to make a difference, because some of the classes I've seen have been like skipping and dancing classes, which are good, but they're not going to, be enough.
Grow bone.
Yeah, to grow
Yeah.
bone.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. There are actually a number of programs and they have fancy names like Osteo Strong or Buff Bones.
Mm,
We've done research on those programs and they do not work. And worse, Osteo Strong is actually dangerous because it does cause fractures.
wow.
So you do have to be very careful. There are all sorts of, physios will say we've got this bone program and you should do it, but they have no evidence. And they're welcome to do what they like, but until they have evidence that what they've developed is actually effective, I think that's misleading their
Yes.
clients, because most of the things they come up with are just generic exercise programs, and we've known 20 years of research shows that exercise doesn't work. The only thing that is going to work, where there's evidence to show that you can grow bone, is Onero.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I sort of popped that in there, because at different times my clients will mention, oh, yeah, I go to the gym and I lift weights, or I go to this class for older ladies and we lift some hand weights. And I said, well, that might be fun, it might be good exercise, but it's probably not helping your bones get stronger. So yeah, it's just something that we've got to be mindful and be consistent, I think, in terms of our messaging. But it is annoying. I know in my own field of work, you get annoyed when you see things that are offering all of these benefits and you know that there's no evidence, and you know that if you do go on this, restrictive diet, not only are you going to, rebound and regain the fat in the process, you've probably lost muscle and bone. So yeah, it is frustrating, but it's good to be able to share today, about Onero, a program that actually does make a difference. So, Belinda, thanks again for agreeing to be a guest on the Eating for You podcast. I'll make sure the links to the Bone Clinic are provided with this episode's notes, so people have got that direct access to that information.
Fabulous. That was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please let us know and leave us a comment or share the link on your social media pages. And I look forward to sharing with you again next week. You have been listening to the Eating for You podcast with Sally Ann Pisk. If a long-term way of healthier eating is of interest to you, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast.